Hello and welcome to Fantasy Football by Ben. Today I'll be talking about my top 15 wide receivers for this season. I hope you enjoy. At number 1, I have Davante Adams. Davante Adams last season, when he was playing and he was healthy, and he missed 2 games, 2.5 technically. He was the top fantasy receiver ending the season anyways in fantasy points, and that's including him missing 2.5 games. And Davante Adams, with Aaron Rodgers, is really, really good. Aaron Rodgers finds him in the red zone, finds him anytime on the field. And if Aaron Rodgers has as good of a season as he had last season, Davante Adams will have as good of a season as he had last season. And I don't think Davante Adams can get much higher, better, but if he plays the whole season, maybe he can. And so hopefully that's what he does. I have him at number 1 going into the season. I think he's going to be the top receiver this year. At number 2, I have Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill was kind of the same thing. Patrick Mahomes. Tyreek Hill didn't really get hurt last season at all, so he didn't really miss any games. He missed the last game because of just rest, but outside of that, he didn't miss any games. And Patrick Mahomes had a really good season last year too. But if Patrick Mahomes can stay healthier than what he was last year, then I think that means that Tyreek Hill will have a phenomenal year. 2 years in a row. I have a number 2. I'm pretty sure that he's like a consensus 1 or 2 spot. I have him at number 2 though, going into the season. I don't know if he will be as good touchdown-wise as Davante, but Davante will have, or has had a better season last year than Tyreek Hill, fantasy-wise. At number 3, this one's kind of, I would say 3 to probably 6 is up and down with the players. And I have A.J. Brown going into the season at number 3. They lost Corey Davis. They lost Jonnu Smith. I think that this is going to be a big year for A.J. Brown. He might get double teamed more, but I think that he's good enough that he can get open off a double team. And I'm expecting a really big season out of A.J. Brown this year. And last year I was expecting a really big season out of him. And, he did really well last year. But hopefully he stays healthy. Hopefully he doesn't get hurt to start off the year. And has a really big season like he did from weeks 8 last season to week 12 or week 14 or something. It was a very good run for A.J. Brown, and I think he could probably do that again. And I don't know if they're going to draft wide receiver or what's going to happen, but right now I have him at number 3 going into the season. At number 4, I have a guy who also just lost their second best receiver, but I do think that a receiver on that team will step up. This is Stefan Diggs. I think Stefan Diggs had a really good season last year, and I think he can honestly only get almost better from there because he didn't have very many touchdowns. He was fine. He had a lot of catches. He led the league in catches. He had a lot of receiving yards. He led the league in receiving yards. I think that Stefan Diggs is the guy, though, and I think he probably could have a better season because it was his first season with the Buffalo Bills, so it was his first season with Josh Allen. So I do think that they're only going to grow together better. And so I think that Stefan Diggs will have a really good season. I have a number 4 going into my preseason, but I think that if they draft another wide receiver or that the Tennessee Titans draft a wide receiver, that either lowers Diggs' value or Brown's value. And I think that it would probably hurt Diggs more if they draft wide receiver. But I don't think the Bills really need a wide receiver for that group that they have. I think they're pretty solid. And Josh Allen's a really good quarterback, so I trust the Buffalo Bills passing game, and I think that Stefan Diggs is going to have a really big season. At number 5, I have DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf is interesting because he's a really big touchdown guy, doesn't get a whole lot of catches, but gets a lot of yards. And he still has Russell Wilson as his quarterback, and they just signed Tyler Lockett to a really big deal. So I do think that if Tyler Lockett wasn't there, the DK Metcalf would probably actually be lower, but also at the same time, maybe it would be like the A.J. Brown thing where he's getting double teamed, but he can beat them. But as of right now, with Tyler Lockett there, that takes away either the number 1 corner or the number 2 corner. And so then either DK is taking the 1 or 2 corner. But DK Metcalf was playing against number 1 corners last year, and he was blowing right by him, and he was catching deep passes. So I do think he can do that again. And so I have DK Metcalf at 5. I think he could be further up or could be lower. Your opinion? So when I said that the 3 through 6 is interchangeable, I do think that that is true. And having DK Metcalf at 5, you could probably put him ahead of Stefan Diggs or put him ahead of A.J. Brown if you really want. Or you could put him ahead of DeAndre Hopkins, who I have at 6. And I think those 4 guys are pretty interchangeable. They're number 1 receivers on their team, and they're all on heavy passing offenses. And so I do think, the Titans aren't really a heavy passing offense, but A.J. Brown's their best receiver, so he gets the bulk of their passes, and kind of the same thing with DK Metcalf. I would say that they're probably a first run team, but Russell Wilson's just such a good quarterback that DK Metcalf automatically is a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy probably top 6 wide receiver in fantasy because of that reason, that Russell Wilson will throw really great deep balls and DK Metcalf catches them and he scores a lot of touchdowns. Like I was just saying though, I do have DeAndre Hopkins at number 6. And I mean, that offense is really good and they're adding a lot of wide receivers to that offense. And so I think that might hurt DeAndre Hopkins a little bit, but he's the clear-cut number 1 wide receiver on that team. And so I do think that makes him Kyler Murray's favorite target. And DeAndre Hopkins was second in the league in receiving receptions last year. And so I do think that DeAndre Hopkins will have another big season. It's just like the same thing with Diggs. This is going to be his second season with the quarterback that he's been playing with, Kyler Murray. And so I do think they're going to get a better connection. And I think DeAndre Hopkins might even get more touchdowns this year with them. So I think that the Arizona Cardinals with DeAndre Hopkins and Kyler Murray throwing the ball to him, I think it's going to be a really good duo this year. And I have Kyler Murray ranked really high because of DeAndre Hopkins this season. At number 7, I have a guy who was a rookie last year, and he had a really good breakout season, and I think he could possibly do it again. That's why I had his quarterback ranked so high. I think Justin Jefferson will have potentially a similar year that he had last year and might actually be better. It depends how healthy Thielen can stay. And I do think when Thielen's playing, that actually helps Justin Jefferson, so he's not taking the cornerback 1 most of the time. And so I do think that Justin Jefferson is a really solid player, and Kirk Cousins will get him the ball. And Justin Jefferson didn't really come on until week 5 last year, so if he can stay pretty consistent the whole year, I think he could be a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy. I'm at number 7 right now. Obviously, that things could change depending on what they do in the draft. And I guess you could say that with any team. And so right now I have Justin Jefferson at 7, but he could move up or could move down depending on what happens in the draft. At number 8, I have Calvin Ridley. I think that Calvin Ridley is interesting because he's probably the wide receiver 1 in Atlanta now. Or pretty close, if not. But he gets more balls. He's a better touchdown scorer than Julio. And so I do think that he's probably the wide receiver 1 there right now. And Julio last year could not stay healthy, so that really hurts his value. And so I have Calvin Ridley at 8. I do think, though, if they ever get rid of Matt Ryan, I think that Calvin Ridley will get hurt a little bit because of that. Matt Ryan's got a pretty solid deep ball. And Calvin Ridley last year was really, really good. And he was wide receiver 1 for a lot of the year last year in fantasy, to start off the year, obviously. And I think that he could probably do that again. And if he could stay consistent, he's definitely in the top 5 wide receivers. But he was not consistent near the end of the year. And that really hurt his fantasy value. And he was hurt a little bit and dinged up. And so I do think that if he stays healthy and he gets as much volume as he was the first couple weeks in fantasy, I think he could be like a top 5 fantasy wide receiver. But right now I have a number 8 because I need to make sure he's going to stay healthy, and obviously you can't predict that stuff. So I think that if he stays healthy, he's definitely a wide receiver 1 for the Falcons this season, who I have at number 8. At number 9, I have a guy that was very solid for the Chicago Bears last year, and I think he's been a pretty solid receiver no matter where he's been and when he's been healthy. Allen Robinson has been very good the last couple of seasons when he's been healthy, and even with Mitch Trubisky throwing the ball, I think that Allen Robinson's still a wide receiver 1 in fantasy, and I think he's just going to get better with Andy Dalton. I think Andy Dalton's a better quarterback for what Allen Robinson brings to the table, and so I think that Allen Robinson might actually have a better season than he had last year, but I don't know if the Bears' offense is going to be any better. I don't know if they're going to add things to their offensive line or if they're going to get Andy Dalton some help protecting him. Because if he has time, maybe he's going to be as good of a quarterback as he was with the Bengals back in the day. You don't know. I think Allen Robinson, though, could have a really big season. He's going to be the main target that Andy Dalton looks at. So I think that automatically makes Allen Robinson a very solid fantasy option wide receiver because he probably could catch over 100 balls this year. And so I think that this is going to be a really good season for Allen Robinson, who I have at number 9, but he might end up moving up ahead of people near when fantasy draft comes around. And so I think that he's just a solid receiver, and this could be a really big season for him and Andy Dalton. I have a guy at number 10 that is flying below people's radars because of how bad he was last season compared to the years before. That's Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas is kind of interesting because he just lost Drew Brees, who Michael Thomas is known for running slants and running out routes and running all these little short routes. And, I mean, that's Drew Brees' game. And so it's going to be interesting to see him with either Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill. And so this could be either a really good season for Michael Thomas where he gets a lot of targets, gets a lot of catches, or it could be another season like last season where he's not as heavily targeted as he is or as he was prior to Drew Brees being retired now. And so I personally think that Michael Thomas will have another really big season. I don't think he'll be as good as he was with Drew Brees because Drew Brees did throw those short routes to him, so Michael Thomas would get a lot of catches, and that's why he broke the catch record. And so I do think that this season will be a test to see how good of a receiver Michael Thomas actually is without Drew Brees. And so I'm kind of curious. I have him at number 10 right now, but I don't know if I should move him up or move him down. But we'll see how he does this season with the quarterback that's new. And, I mean, if they play Winston, he's not as accurate as Drew Brees, but he's more of like a deep ball thrower. And Taysom Hill is probably going to be a more like runny quarterback and maybe throw short passes to Michael Thomas. And you never know how many touchdowns he's going to get and stuff like that. They got rid of Emmanuel Sanders, so I don't think he's really competing with anybody else for the wide receiver 1 like balls. So I do think that he's going to get a lot of passes to him, but I don't know if he's going to catch 70% of them like he has in his past. At number 11, I have Keenan Allen for the Chargers. Well, so Keenan Allen is like this opposite of what I would say about like DeAndre Hopkins and Stefan Diggs. Keenan Allen has had a quarterback that was a rookie, and so they weren't really used to each other because of the opposite way. Keenan Allen didn't move teams, didn't go somewhere where it's a new quarterback for him, but it is a new quarterback for him. But I think that he could only get better, and last season, going into the season, my personal rankings before I started up YouTube, I had Keenan Allen very high up, and I really liked Keenan Allen because I thought that Tyrod Taylor would be a good quarterback, and it ended up being Justin Herbert, who was a good quarterback for him. So I think that Keenan Allen, again this season, will have a really good season, and he did last year. He had a really good season when Justin Herbert started and was throwing the ball to him, and once Justin Herbert kind of calmed down near the end of the season, then Keenan Allen started not doing as well, but he was still a solid receiver, and I have him at number 11. I think he could have a really good season again, like he was having early in the season, but I don't really know what that offense is going to be like with the new coach and stuff, so I'm interested to see how Keenan Allen will do this year. Right now I'm at number 11, though. At number 12, I have Mike Evans. Mike Evans last year was doing so well scoring touchdowns, and I think that he can improve on that. I think he could probably actually score more touchdowns than he did the prior season, and so I do think that this could be a really big season for Mike Evans, and maybe he'll get more receiving yards because that's what he was lacking. In his first, I think, 7 years now, he's had over 1,000 yards receiving, and he got that mark last year, but barely, and I think he could do more receiving yards, maybe less touchdowns, but I think he's finally getting used to having Tom Brady as his quarterback, and so Tom Brady near the end of the year started trusting him a little bit more and started throwing I mean, he looked for him in the end zone almost every time. So I do think that Mike Evans will score a lot of touchdowns, and potentially he could be inside the top 10 wide receivers in fantasy by the next year, or by the end of the year next year. And so I think this could be a really big season for Mike Evans, who I have at number 12 going into the season so far. At number 13, I have Terry McLaurin. So Terry McLaurin finally got a good quarterback. I'm just curious to see what he's going to do with a good quarterback. So last year, he was playing with, they had Alex Smith, they had Kyle Allen, they had Dwayne Haskins, and the best quarterback out of them for Terry McLaurin was probably Kyle Allen, and he got hurt. Dwayne Haskins they cut, and Alex Smith was pretty solid for him, but Alex Smith doesn't really throw the ball deep, and Terry McLaurin is definitely a very good deep ball catcher. And so they finally got Ryan Fitzpatrick, and I think that that's really going to help Terry McLaurin this season. And so I have him at number 13 right now, but I think he could move up or could move down. They added Curtis Samuel. I think it's going to take a couple touches away from Terry, but also I think if Terry gets 10 targets a game, let's be more realistic, 8 targets a game, I think that he could catch 6 of them for 60 or 70 yards and a touchdown kind of thing. And I think that Ryan Fitzpatrick could have a really good season for the Washington football team this year. And so I do think that Terry McLaurin will benefit from having a better quarterback throwing the ball. At number 14, I have Julio Jones, who I think will have a better year than he had last year because he was hurt last year. So hopefully he stays healthy this whole season. And the Falcons like to throw the ball. They get behind. And so I do think that's benefiting Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones. I just don't know which one of them will have a better season going forward this season. And last year's Calvin Ridley, and this year maybe it's Julio. I don't know. It depends who scores more touchdown, who gets more passes for Matt Ryan. I do think that Matt Ryan likes Julio more. I think that Julio is a better receiver than Calvin Ridley, but Calvin Ridley is a phenomenal receiver, but Julio is probably one of the best receivers in the NFL still, skill-wise. And so I don't know which one of them is going to be better fantasy-wise, but I think they're both going to be really solid. And I think that Calvin Ridley, as of right now, I have him ranked higher, but I think Calvin Ridley will be a better receiver this year in fantasy. He scores more touchdowns typically, and Julio's more of like a catch balls kind of guy. And so I do think that Julio Jones could have a really good season, but he hasn't played like every game in the season in a very long time. And so I do think that hurts his fantasy value because then if he doesn't play, then obviously he's not doing anything for your fantasy team. So I think that this could be a really good season for Calvin Ridley, and maybe Julio Jones will take more of like a backseat approach and not take as many wide receiver 1 balls. At number 15, I have Amari Cooper. I think that if Dak Prescott comes back, even if he comes back halfway through the season, I think that Amari Cooper's value definitely rises when Dak Prescott comes back. But they have a lot of good receivers. CeeDee Lamb's still there. Michael Gallup. I think that Amari Cooper in general will have a really good season. He's probably their lead receiver right now. But going forward, maybe it's going to be CeeDee Lamb. But I think that the quarterback, whoever is starting for them, will, if it's not Dak Prescott, will find Amari Cooper the most. Amari Cooper's really great off the line, gets open really well. And right now I'm at number 15, but if CeeDee Lamb is playing really well I read stuff that he's playing really well, then I think maybe I can move Amari Cooper down and maybe CeeDee Lamb up. But as of right now, I have Amari Cooper inside my top 15 wide receivers going into the season, and this list will change a lot. And as of right now, I'm going to stick with Amari Cooper at 15. I think that he could have a really good season. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe if you're new. I'll see you in the next video tomorrow. Peace.